So welcome back. You're watching the Sian
and
Tamara show.
Yay! We're back and we're standing.
We're into the 16 days of activism, and the show will be basically about the first day of the 16 days of activism.
That's the
25th of November, and it's
the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It's our number one.
Basically, you can't really pretend there's no violence against women. There's violence happening everywhere. Not really just the physical violence, but there's emotional, mental, verbal, and just that all sorts of violence against women.
And of course, violence isn't just limited to women. There are so many different sort of gender identities that have been persecuted or sort of, been the victims of and survivors of these kinds of violence. Because, whenever you question the status quo as a woman or as someone who doesn't necessarily fit in to the binary male-female sort of systems, you're often faced with a lot of, people getting angry because they're really comfortable within the status quo because that benefits them. So, that's basically where violence comes from. When you question the status quo, you're upsetting the people in power often, and, then they get really angry and they start hitting you.
But Sian, why is violence bad? I mean, sometimes I guess people, in high school, if you wouldn't stand up or physically punch or fight with another person, you're looked down as upon a loser. So why is violence really bad?
This isn't a very clear black and white thing, basically because violence has so many different ways of culminating itself. First of all, when you're sort of faced with violence, that's basically violating your human rights, to security. And often if you're faced with violence, that sort of stops you from accessing certain things like equal pay or getting to, resources or infrastructure, for example. You get sort of pushed out because, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be a working woman because women's places are in the home. So, that's stopping a lot of people. And, of course, when you are talking about, losing out economically, there's a lot of other things, too.
Because, obviously, Sian, you mentioned earlier that losing out economically, in healthcare you would have to leave work, and then so that's taking out your days from work and then your pay, so you're going out. And also recovery, obviously you wouldn't want to walk around with a big patch of heavy black eye, and for some it's really serious, either broken bone or missing teeth. So normally we would stay home and just cover it up, because obviously some people would like to share that picture of everything is going fine at home, got it under control. So basically you're losing out economically, and we wouldn't want that.
Now, while we have focused a lot on the physical aspects of violence, there is more to that. But, physical violence, it does lose out a lot because you do have to go get yourself seen. Or if you don't get yourself seen and something really bad has happened, like some sort of internal bleeding or you lose some teeth and stuff, that's going to end up coming up later in life when you're having to deal with the sort of repercussions of those kinds of, injuries and stuff. And of course, there are all sorts of other things, such as trauma and being mentally impacted by violence against women.
This trauma, and then obviously some people get depressed because low self-esteem. Because you've been with someone who you trusted, and then when it results in that kind of stage where violence actually occurs, you're actually affected mentally. You'd have a low self-esteem. You wouldn't want to go out anymore. You won't believe in yourself. You'll keep having flashbacks of what happened, or if everything is solved, it'll affect your daily living.
So it's this kind of violence that sort of perpetuates gender imbalances because there's that element of fear, whether fear of being physically harmed or, socially ostracized, or sort of, mentally attacked because, you can question your authority if you sort of, challenge the status quo. So, that sort of idea of you have to conform to the status quo is what sort of perpetuates gender imbalances, whether we're talking about gender, specifically women who get their own day, but also, whether you have a different sort of gender identity from what's considered the norm. So I guess we're kind of wrapping up now, and just to finish, violence is never good in any form, and I guess it is kind of a common sense thing for us today, but when you look around us, violence isn't just interpersonal, but it spans over social groups, it spans over within schools, which you've seen happen in Suva a lot more recently, and it happens between groups of people, whether that be states sort of fighting with each other, and that's where war comes from. Violence is just not good. It is not constructive.
You could always talk about it punching and shooting and all the physical and verbal abuse sort of violence isn't necessarily the way to sort out differences, but really and then people always talking about dialogue, but then really you have to like actually get to like a deeper meaning of dialogue, not just talking about it, but also understanding emotionally and sharing sort of the same sentiments and trying to get to the root cause of why you're actually in that place.
So that was the Sian and
Tamara show.
And join us, because coming up over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be having the rest of the 16 days of activism. And while not something happens every day, there are still quite a few key days.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
We'll be back with more